Both my grandparents were track and field athletes as well as my mom, so we've always inspired each other. I grew up right on the coast, so all my early memories involve being around water. The connection to the oceans and rivers has always been something my family has shared together. My grandfather was always a really big role model for me. Coming from mainland China, he never got to interact with the ocean, so it was the rivers that he felt connected to. When he moved to Canada, the ocean was completely new for him, and it was something he fell in love with. My grandpa taught me the values of protecting the environment and the things that we love. This connection to our oceans and rivers remains something that unites us all.
All right. Whoa, hello. All right. Okay, guys. So today, welcome back to Conversations with Athletes, hosted by me, Abel. And today we are going to be having a very, very special guest on. She is a 2020 Olympian for the Heptathlete event, and she's the first naturalized Chinese athlete to compete for China from Canada. Her name's Schultz, also known as Zheng Ninali. As I'm gonna did I pronounce it right? Perfect.
Yeah, that's right.
How are you today? Introduce yourself.
I'm pretty good. Yeah, I mean, you pretty much covered it. My name is Nina, or my Chinese name. I go by Zheng Ninali, but I typically go by Nina just for short.
That's cool. That's cool. All right. So, talk to us. Who are you? What do you do? I mean, obviously we know you do athletics, track and field, but give us a more in-depth view of what you kind of do overall.
Well, I'll kind of give you a background of my history in track and field. So it's sort of a family business, I guess you could say, because both my grandparents on my mom's side did athletics, and they were the ones that coached me growing up. And then my mom was also a track and field athlete, and then I'm also a track and field athlete. The only person in my family that actually isn't a track and field athlete is my brother. He went the hockey route. But yeah, we're a family full of athletes. And like I said, growing up, my grandparents coached me. And my grandma has a very special history in track and field as well. She was the first Chinese woman to hold a sports world record of any kind. And she held the world record in the women's high jump back in 1957. So I got some big shoes to fill.
Amazing. I mean, obviously being in a family full of athletes, you do feel a bit of the pressure, but you're doing really well. I can say, from some mates of mine and back from Malaysia, we were watching you in the Olympics, and you look like you did great. Yeah, amazing. So, okay, so that's cool. Talk about the Olympics. What was that like? I mean, was that your first Olympics? That was your first Olympics, right? Yeah. What was the qualifying process like? And how did you get about to go to the Olympics?
Yeah, well, the qualification process was very stressful for me because, a little bit of background, I was pretty much injured for 3 years and hadn't really competed for 3 years during the period that I was switching nationality to compete for China. I couldn't compete during that time, and I was also injured. So last year, to qualify for the Olympics, I hadn't trained at a high level for a very long time. And I didn't have a coach at the time, actually. I wanted to coach myself for the season, just based on some bad experiences with previous coaches. I think I had some trust issues, so I just wanted to see if I could get back into the sport and enjoy it again. Because honestly, I was pretty close to quitting during those 3 years that I couldn't compete or really train. I wrote my own training for the entire season, and I had a couple of coaches here and there help me because I do 7 events, obviously. So I had certain coaches help me in various events. But yeah, it was really difficult because I spent most of the season in quarantine, training in quarantine. So I started off the fall of 2020 in the US because I couldn't get back to China because of the COVID restrictions.
Yeah.
And then finally they were like, okay, you can come but you had to stay quarantined in a hotel for 3 weeks, and then you have to quarantine a little bit more, and then you can go into the facility. So I'm very thankful though, because they set me up with a lot of equipment when I was training in the hotel, so I was able to work out with a treadmill and stuff. And then after quarantining in a hotel for 3 weeks, I went straight into an athletics facility to quarantine, and I pretty much didn't really step outside of a track outside of outside of that time.
Yeah.
And then it was just a lot of training and a lot of stress, because obviously I wanted to make it. But I hadn't competed in so long, and I didn't know where I was. And then I finally had my first heptathlon back, and my body did not respond the way I thought it would at all, because the heptathlon is a very physically challenging event. You know, we're doing 7 events in 2 days. So the first meet went very not well, or like did not go how I expected. So it was at that time I was probably at my most stressed out of the year. But then not long after, I had the opportunity to go compete in Europe to score some points. And that's how I ended up qualifying for the Olympics. I had to do 2 heptathlons back to back within 2 weeks, which is usually not recommended. You want to take at least 4 weeks in between, because it's very hard on your body. So it was just a lot of just straight up hard work in track and field. Like, I pretty much didn't have a life besides track and field last year while qualifying for the Olympics. But yeah, I mean, I'm thankful I did it, because obviously it's been my dream to make the Olympics since I was 8 years old. So I guess it was worth it.
It's all worth it. And you nearly quit, right?
Yeah, I did come. I mean, it's weird looking back now, because looking back now, I'm like, oh, it wasn't a big deal. Like, you know, I wasn't allowed to compete during that period anyways. But because I was dealing with so many injuries, I just really, like, in the middle of that time, I was very emotional and stressed out. But now looking back, I'm like, it wasn't that bad.
Yeah, I mean, well, congratulations again on it's a big achievement going to Olympics. You know, obviously,
Thank you.
It's very select few like can go, but amazing. All right, let's talk about a bit of your humble beginnings, college track and field. You know, competing in the NCAA, competing for K-State. I'm a Jayhawks for you, by the way. But you know, I mean, so you went to K-State, which is obviously a Kansas's rival school. But how was that like? Like, and you said you moved to the University of Georgia. What was the transition like? Why did you move? You know, talk a bit about that.
Yeah. Well, first going to Kansas from Vancouver, Canada, was honestly a very big culture shock, because I don't know if you've ever been to Vancouver, but it's a very culturally diverse place, and Kansas is just kind of like the middle of nowhere in the US. So it was very challenging at first to kind of find where I fit in. But there were also a handful of other international student athletes there that I think really helped me feel like I was at home.
Okay.
I did have a pretty good first 2 years there, but I ended up getting my first major injury when I was at Kansas State. I tore a ligament in my elbow, and I had to get surgery where they like take something from here and they put it in your elbow.
Yeah.
And the recovery process for that surgery takes about a year, and you have to do very specific rehab. But the rehab process was not being handled properly at my first school, and I don't want to say anything bad specifically, but generally speaking, in the NCAA, I think they don't have the best medical care for track and field athletes. At the time, I thought it was really only a problem at that school, which is why I ended up moving to a different school, only to like eventually get injured there again and kind of realize it's a problem with the whole system.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right, that's cool. And slowly you moved on. You decided, I want to go professional and I want to take this to the next level. And that's when you start competing in bigger events, right?
Yeah.
And I also remember that you got a gold medal in the Commonwealth Games.
No, it was a silver medal.
Okay, the silver medal. Okay, still is an achievement, which is really cool. So yeah, I mean, again, we're gonna go back a bit on the topic on naturalization. You know, competing for China, but you being Canadian, what was that like? Like, would you get any backlash? Did you face any adversity you thought that you wouldn't face?
Yeah, it was. I definitely did a little bit during the period that I was trying to qualify for the Olympics, which really kind of added into the stress of what I was going through. So it was kind of challenging. But it was just such a weird experience for me because I feel like I'm a very like private person. I don't really care for like media attention or anything like that. And I think I'm just like very good at being invisible. So I didn't
Yeah.
think anyone would ever care about me switching nationality because honestly, like I wasn't
Yeah.
even really that good of an athlete for Canada. You know, I placed once at one international meet, but like I just didn't think I was a big deal. And then yeah, so when I even first made the switch, like that decision happened back in, I mean, 3 years ago. When was it, like 2018 or something like that, 2019?
Yeah.
But then last year, in the middle of COVID, when I was trying to qualify for the Olympics, somebody in Canada wrote basically a propaganda article about me, and that got me a lot and a lot of backlash, which I just was not prepared for at all. And it was just really weird for me to deal with because I feel like a lot of people who are multicultural will kind of understand when I say that their like cultural identity is kind of confusing in the first place. And I've always felt that I was Chinese growing up, but then it was like when this article came out, it's like people were only giving me the option to you can only be Chinese or you can only be Canadian, when I've felt Chinese the entire time I was growing up in Canada. You know, I still feel like I'm Canadian. I did grow up and I was born and raised there, but it's like a lot of people felt like you could only be one or the other, which I feel like it doesn't really make sense because Canada is such a culturally diverse place.
Yeah.
And it's like nobody has ever had a problem with me being Chinese before. But then suddenly when I decided to represent a country that has contributed to my growth in this sport significantly, it became a serious issue for people.
Oh, cool. That's really cool. And you know, it was hard. I'm sure it was hard to cope with that, but how did you cope with that? With the backlash?
It honestly took a really long time. I feel like it took a long time for me to address because when it first happened, it was like really hard for me. And there was one day where I just like stayed in bed and like couldn't train at all because I got some really nasty messages, and it's just like it never happened to me before, so it's hard to deal with. But then obviously like I was still trying to qualify for the Olympics, so I was just kind of like screw it, just don't think about any of it, and I just kind of like buried it deep down inside me. And then once my season was over, it like I feel like kind of came back to me, and just it felt very weird again.
That's cool. That's cool. That's great to hear. And the culture change, you know, from coaching in Canada to coaching in China, I'm sure it has to be really different. How did you was it a big shock for you, or were you anticipating for that? How did you deal with that?
Honestly, not really, because the thing that people didn't realize is that growing up, I was basically primarily coached by my grandparents,
Okay.
who are Chinese Chinese athletes, right?
Yeah.
And growing up, I also spent months and months camping in China at various times. Sometimes during the school year, I would just miss a whole bunch of school to go back to China to train for athletics. So people didn't really realize that I grew up in the Chinese athletic system for a long time. So it wasn't anything new for me, really.
That's cool. 可以说一点点华语是吗？
Yeah.
Yeah.
可以说一点。
Okay, that's good. That's good. All right. So, you know, obviously, with all this that just happened, it's. Sorry, if you know what I'm asking, how old are you now?
I'm 23.
23. You know, being an athlete at the age of 21, right? If I'm not mistaken. And no, wait, 2021. 22.
I was 22 in Tokyo.
22,
Yeah.
Do you think that's a big thing for you? Do you think that other aspiring young athletes could do the same at that age?
Yeah, I feel like in recent years, especially, we've seen so many different athletes break barriers in terms of people thinking they're too young to do something or they're too old to do something. You know, we have athletes in their mid 30s still competing at a very high level, which is typically unusual. And then we have very young athletes. I mean, I definitely know some people who qualified for the Olympics who are even younger than me. So I honestly, I didn't think my achievement was anything special. I think anybody can get anything done if they're in the right circumstances and they put in the work to make it happen.
That's cool. That's cool. And you know, what message would you give to kids that have spent like you basically have started athletics at a very young age, and just say, you know what, I want to take it to the next level? I want to take it to the Olympics. I want to win an Olympic gold medal. What would your message be to them?
I mean, obviously, depending on what sport you're in, I think just acknowledge that it's a very long process. And the most important thing is to remember why you started the sport, because it can be easy to get lost along the way with the pressure, and making a career out of sports can be very difficult. But I think just stay true to your passion in the sport and enjoy the process along the way, because that's definitely the most important thing.
That's cool. That's cool. And it's normal to face a lot of, barriers, a lot of things that will stop you. Would you say it's normal to face that?
Especially yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like every year it's something new. Like looking back to where I was 4 years ago, I would have never ever imagined some of the things that I had to go through to get where I am today. So it's a learning journey, and I think adversity sucks, obviously, when you're going through it, but it turns you into the person that you're meant to be, and it builds you stronger every time you overcome something.
That's very, very cool. And I mean, that's a great message to give to younger athletes, would you say?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. It just enjoy the process, even if it's cool. Crappy at times.
All right. So, would you say that, obviously competing in the Olympics, what was the pressure like? Because kids, many kids these days, they face a lot of pressure even at bigger tournaments, but not as big as the Olympics. I would say, as a very young athlete and not having that experience before, how did it feel like for you?
Wait, sorry. Do you mind if I let the cat out?
Yeah, sure. I'll pause it for a while.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah. Let's go.
Could you repeat the question?
Oh yeah. Sorry. Okay. So how do you cope with the pressure in competing in the Olympics, having you not been at that stage before, or being very young and competing in the Olympics? How did that feel for you?
Yeah, I feel like it was kind of a weird experience, because I think I didn't feel any pressure until, it's almost like I didn't realize I was about to compete at the Olympics. And then the day before, once my competition schedule came out, I suddenly freaked out for 5 minutes, and then I kind of calmed down again. But I feel like my whole model growing up, and this is something that my grandpa taught me growing up, is that you're always just trying to compete with yourself. Obviously, some people are very motivated to beat other people, but at the end of the day, the only thing you can control is yourself. And it's important to be able to manage those external factors, as in what motivates you and what is too much for you to be worrying about. So I think that's just something that comes with experience over time. But also I was just grateful to be at my first Olympics. So I wasn't necessarily super stressed out about, oh, you have to do really well. Obviously I had expectations for myself, but I was just trying to go out there and just enjoy the experience as much as possible.
That's really cool. That's cool. And did you expect to obviously succeed, get a medal at least, or place at a certain
no, I definitely did not expect to get a medal. I mean, it's kind of funny, because I had done a few interviews earlier in that year of people asking me about what my expectations were at the Olympics. And I have never ever said in an interview that I'm going to go to the Tokyo Olympics and I'm going to get a medal, because I'm very realistic in my expectations of myself. And I knew that at least this Olympics, it probably wasn't likely to happen. I was thankful to qualify, and that was my ultimate goal. But then some articles came out saying, yeah, I'm going to go and I'm going to get a medal. And I was like, I never said that. That's something that I never saw myself doing. But my goal was to go and come top 8, and I wasn't able to do that. So that was a little bit disappointing. But yeah, I did not expect to go a medal.
Perfectly fine. Realism, being realistic.
Yeah.
I like it. All right. So after all this, do you feel like you've accomplished it all? Going to the Olympics, do you feel like, what? I felt like I've accomplished it all. But not quit, but do you feel like you've accomplished a lot of things?
Honestly, no. And
okay.
this is something I've tried to work on with my sports psychologist, because I feel like I have a bit of imposter syndrome, that I just obviously, like I said, that I've wanted to go to the Olympics since I was 8. So I felt that when I qualified, eventually I would just feel like I finally did it, I accomplished something, and just feel some kind of overwhelming joy. But that never came when I qualified. So I was like, okay, maybe once I get there, I'll feel it. And that never happened. And then I was like, okay, maybe when I finish competing, it'll happen. And that never happened. And it's just, I don't know. It's weird for me because in my head, and obviously a lot of athletes glorify the Olympics. And I think maybe because it was the Tokyo Olympics and people weren't really allowed to watch and we were quarantined in the village, maybe that is a part of the reason why I feel the way I do. But it was just, for me, it was very underwhelming. And I know a lot of people don't expect that answer, but I don't know. It's just weird. It's just weird to think about.
All right, that's fine. All right, that's cool. We're gonna do a bit of a Q&A. I've asked some people that I know that do athletics some questions to ask you. Maybe you can answer them for them. All right, so first question is favorite and least favorite event in the heptathlon.
That definitely depends on what I'm doing well in. Like for the longest time, the 800 was always my work. Like I hated that event with a passion. But the last year I got a lot better, so it became easier. I would say favorite event for the most part is javelin, because I just think it's the most fun. I mean, you get to throw.
I see a lot of those. I see a lot of those on your Instagram. Yeah, you post a lot of those. That's
actually the last event. That's the last event I ended up learning. So it's definitely not my best by any means, but I think it's the most fun.
I'm terrible at that. When I did that, it's hard. Like I threw it and it went straight in front. I was like, what? That's not supposed to happen.
No, people seriously underestimate how difficult javelin is, and that's why I really like the more technical events, which is why javelin is my favorite, because it takes so much skill. Like not everyone can do it just because you're very athletic. So it's a big learning curve. But I'd say right now my least favorite event is
just blurt it out.
I don't know.
You just have one, right? I mean, there's one where you just say like, I don't want to go for that one.
It kind of depends what I'm not doing well in. I guess I'll just stick to the 800. It just sucks the most. I'll just stick to the 800 being the worst.
Cool. All right, tips on doing the heptathlon. Any tips?
Don't do it. No, it's I think if you choose to go the route of the heptathlon, you have to really enjoy the process, because it's very hard to train for, and you definitely train more than the average athlete who just does one event. So you really have to enjoy it. I don't think it's an event that you can just do because you're good at it, because once the passion dies out, it's very hard to stay motivated. So yeah, just make sure you enjoy it along the way.
That's cool. And last one, this one's going to be a bit of kind of the political side, but I feel like still a fair question. How do you deal with body image issues if she has or had as a female athlete in the public eye?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like I've been lucky in that way that I haven't really dealt with like severe self-confidence or body issues. I've definitely, obviously being around athletes all the time, I see a lot of female athletes, especially, go through things like body dysmorphia and eating disorders. And it sucks to see. It really does, because I mean, we're very strong and athletic people, right? It's something to be proud of. I just, at the end of the day, people's bodies are always going to be different, even if you're doing the exact same regimens, like training, eating, and that's something that we have to accept. And it's just important at the end of the day to love yourself and even what you look like, even if it's not what everyone else looks like.
Cool. All right, we're gonna finish off with a bit of this or that. Okay, we do this kind of small segment at the end, and it's just gonna be just this, that, or this or that. Okay. All right. Obviously, sure. I know you being an Adidas athlete, right? Ultra Boost or Pure Boost?
Say Ultra Boost.
Okay, small feet, can tell. Wait, the Ultra Boost is really uncomfortable. Anyways, AM training or PM training?
PM training.
PM training. All right, that's a 2 out of 2. The other guy that we interviewed, he loved PM training, so got 2 of those now. Track or field?
Field.
because of the javelin.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Are you a vegetarian or a carnivore?
Carnivore. I was a vegetarian for a little bit, but just traveling around, it's hard to maintain that diet.
Fish and China.
But carnivore for now. Yeah.
You love your food. I mean, you love your meat. Same here. All right. Thank you so much for coming on, Nina. And I really appreciate you, obviously spending time to just share your journey, because you're going to be helping a lot of young athletes, youth athletes, especially, understand what a more realistic kind of journey is on, whether it's a heptathlon or just track and field or any other sport, but you've been to the biggest stage, which is the Olympics, and it's so cool. So thanks for coming on, and we hope to hear from you soon again. All right.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.